Hi everyone, Newthany York here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Krallice record, Ygg Huur. These guys are a New York metal band. This is their latest full-length LP. They have really fantastic musicians in the band, most notably Mr. Colin Marston, as well as Mr. Mick Barr, both guitarists and metal songwriters extraordinaire. And collectively, these guys have been contributing to the New York experimental metal scene for years and years and years through either production or numerous bands and projects. Just too many to name. We're not going to get too deep into it right now. But Krallice is one of the longest-running entities Marston and Barr have ever been involved in. But it seems like on this new record, in order to keep the beast alive, they've had to change its genetic makeup a little bit. Krallice is no longer simply the sort of progressive, atmospheric black metal band that they've been for years. This new record over here doesn't so much feel like a black metal record. Feels more like a technical and progressive metal record with some black metal undertones. Which I think is fine. There's no outright reason to reject this change just from the get-go. But there are a few things about this album that are surprisingly different when comparing what Krallice is doing here to their earlier stuff. For one, this is a pretty short record. It's just about 35 minutes. So you're not really getting the lengthy, drawn-out, winding compositions that you may have heard on Krallice's previous output. And for whatever reason, not one, not two, not three, but 4 songs in the track listing here clock in at 6 minutes and 41 seconds. They even fade out one track or fade in one track in order to keep this length thing up. And the songs on this record don't really progress with the same kind of consistent fluidity that was featured on Krallice's earlier output too. A lot of the songs on here feature these really jumpy, ever-changing riffs that are very fast, very nimble, very dizzying. They are often crashing into one another or just changing very rapidly, violently rapidly. The songs can be kind of hard to keep track of sometimes. However, it's not like things get so technical or showy that these tracks are impossible to digest like many other projects Marston and Barr have been involved in the past, where they were ultra progressive, ultra technical, ultra experimental. And while this Krallice record isn't completely a reflection of projects like Behold the Arctopus, it certainly seems like Barr and Marston are moving a little bit in that direction. However, this record doesn't read simply as this weird, out-there metal experiment. It's still a very visceral and sometimes exciting record, and there are quite a few tremolo pick guitars on these tracks, as well as blast beats, so at least there is some kind of consistency going on here, and the vocal deliveries are kind of the screamed, shouted growl, the kind of stuff that you might have caught on their last full-length album. Not quite the black metal vocal delivery you might have heard them delivering early on in their discography. The thing, though, on this album is that the change Krallice presents here isn't really that bad. For the most part, it's interesting. I just wish it was a little longer and a little well orchestrated and organized. At times, the guitars and the drums sound a little jumbled. I wish the bass had a bit more presence. I wish the vocals played a larger role in making these songs catchy and memorable. A lot of the times with Krallice, the vocals kind of feel like a bit of an afterthought. And with all the winding guitar passages on their previous albums being so epic, being so huge, maybe the vocals didn't really need to play that large of a role. But here, maybe I'm kind of feeling like there's a bit more weight put on them. They gotta do something. Still though, Krallice making the conscious decision to write shorter, faster songs has caused them to come out with a very no BS record. They're playing aggressive as hell on this album, and some of the tracks here are actually laced with some pretty awesome melodies, especially on tracks like Idols, where the opening guitar lines on this track are actually very dreary and beautiful, or the really bright, burning, and dramatic and wonderfully layered guitar leads on the song Tyranny of Thought. I loved those too. Krallice brings some cool stuff to the table in the track listing here, but the thing is, by the track Tyranny of Thought, by the time that this album really starts defining itself stylistically, the record starts to tailspin into a really abrupt end with a handful of tracks that kind of feel like they weren't structured that well or put together that well, or end kind of abruptly as this album. The record just runs out of gas, which is kind of weird because of how aggressive it is. Again, I think Krallice came through with an interesting record this time around. I just think this album kind of presented a change. It presented a new sound that they didn't really commit to for that long of a time. I think the brevity of this record, along with the kind of messy production on some of these tracks, doesn't really reflect the care and the quality level and the cohesion that we've heard on previous Krallice albums. This record, while I do think it presents an interesting change of pace, it's a little disheveled, which is why I'm feeling kind of a strong 6 to a light 7 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this record a listen? If you have, what did you think of it? Did you love it, hate it, why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Krallice, forever.